One, I want to talk a little bit about gun violence in America, and do you support any more gun control legislation, such as closing the loophole for gun shows?
I support cracking down on gun traffickers and cracking down on people who use a gun illegally in crimes. President Obama, in the last 9 years, has commuted the federal sentences of more inmates than 9 previous presidents combined. And some of them had gun charges. So we're talking about gun violence, gun safety, common sense gun safety laws. I would think that we should start with a criminal, a drug dealer, who has a gun on their possession, either using it, threatening people with it, or even just carrying it. And we should get them off the street, not commute their sentences, not pardon them. I think that's a huge mistake. So don't come at this and say, well, we need to take more guns out of the hands of law-abiding citizens. We have thousands of laws on the books. Every time one comes down, by definition, a criminal doesn't abide by it. So this constant beating up, Sean, when he sat on the floor of the House of Representatives, he wanted more gun control. I think he was wrong to do that. He started off by saying he doesn't play political games. That's it was against House rules what you did, Sean, sitting on the ground.
I really just want to get your opinion. So you're saying enforce the existing laws, basically. You don't think there's a need for new laws? You would enforce the existing ones? Is that what I'm hearing? I want to make sure I'm hearing you right.
I don't see what new laws could happen that would prevent the gun violence. The way you prevent gun violence is somebody who has a gun in the commission of a crime, you don't commute their sentence. You lock them up, and that's a strong deterrent. And until a law-abiding citizen takes a gun and uses it, then they become a criminal. Then you criminalize it. You don't criminalize it just because you don't like the look of the gun, or you don't think they should have a gun, or you don't think they should have 2 guns or extra ammo or whatever. This is a Second Amendment right. I feel strongly about it, and I'm really concerned with the Supreme Court being at 4-4. D.C. Heller was guaranteed the right of a person to keep and bear arms for personal property safety, not just for hunting. Sean will say he supports hunting, but the Second Amendment has nothing to do with hunting. The Second Amendment has all to do with personal safety, the rights of the individual, and I support that proudly.
Right. So the summary is do nothing. Right, that's the summary.
Well,
that's what he just said.
Gentlemen, I really like it when you both your own views.
Well, let me
not interpret the other one so much. Okay.
That's fine. That's fine, John. If I may answer your question,
absolutely.
The fact is that I have no problem with the Heller decision. I have no problem with the Second Amendment. I grew up shooting a rifle with my brothers. I have no problem with owning a gun to defend yourself in your own home. That's what the Supreme Court told us is the constitutional right under the Second Amendment. No argument for me. But I am not going to sit around and say that we can't do anything, that as Americans, we've got 33,000 people dying of gun violence every year in this country, and there's nothing we can do about it. And what we were sticking up for that he can make fun of, but that I think was very important, was that 49 kids lost their lives in a nightclub in Orlando, Phil. And 27 beautiful little kids lost their lives out of school in Newtown. Mr. Oliva opposes gun-free schools. That's how extreme we're talking about here. Opposes gun-free schools. So the fact is that I believe there are things we can do. I believe we ought to have universal background checks. I believe we ought to have a federal gun trafficking law. I think we ought to say that if you're too dangerous to get on an airplane, you're too dangerous to buy a gun. So no fly, no buy. That is the bill, John, that we were asking a debate for. The reason John Lewis, who's a civil rights icon, who almost lost his life on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, said, enough, we are going to sit down to stand up, was because they would not even have a debate, after all those people were killed on no fly, no buy. So I think that was important, and I think it does a disservice to the victims and their families to treat it like it's some sort of glib subject, or there's nothing we can do. I think we can do a lot better.
Okay. Real quickly.
My wife is from Connecticut. She used to teach at Newtown. That hit really close to home, and where I live, we're really close to Newtown. So, Orlando was a tragedy. Newtown was a tragedy. By all means, absolutely it was. You talked about not sitting around, but that's what you did. You sat around. You sat down. The things that you mentioned, it sounds good, but it's not going to, no fly, no buy. Ted Kennedy was on no fly, no buy list. The terror watch list, you have people on there. You go up, Assemblyman Steve McLaughlin, he used to fly commercial aircraft. He has a friend who flies for Delta. He's on the no-fly list. He can fly commercial passengers, but he can't be a passenger himself. I'm fine with, terrorists absolutely shouldn't have a sniff of a gun, but add in the judiciary, because you saw what happened with the IRS when they targeted conservative groups, Sean, and the unaccountable bureaucrats. If you do that with this, and you have like Ted Kennedy, and Martin Luther King tried getting a gun. He was on a government watch list. He wasn't allowed to get a gun. He was assassinated.
Okay.
I'm in favor of develop probable cause, get a warrant like you would, like a police would with a judge, bring the judiciary in it, and then once the person has terror ties, bring them in for questioning. Don't leave them out on the street. So I think that's common sense, and I think that's what we need to do. All this other scare tactics, I think going after law-abiding citizens and the right to keep and bear arms is the wrong tactic to take. It's not going to do anything. There's ways to go about reducing gun violence, and that's not doing what President Obama did, was commuting the sentence of people charging gun crimes. That's
Real
wrong.
quickly, if you want to say anything.
Yeah, it's a real clear choice. Phil wants to do nothing. I think we can do better.
Okay, great.
No, that's what he just said.
That's fine. I wanted to
Sean sat on the
interrupt-
floor
Excuse me, I want to.
against house rules.
Excuse me.